My name is Evelyn Vance, and if you are listening to this right now, I want you to drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you are tuning in from. Whether you are lying in bed in New York, commuting through London, or watching from somewhere miles away, drop your city or country in the comments. And before I dive into the night my entire life was ripped away from me, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like on this video. Trust me when I say you will not want to miss a single detail of how every single person who betrayed me got exactly what they deserved. It all started on a rainy Tuesday evening in the executive boardroom of Vance Innovations, the cybersecurity firm I built from the ground up over 6 agonizing sleepless years. My hair was tied up in a messy bun, my eyes bloodshot from spending 48 straight hours finalizing the proprietary source code for Sentinel, a revolutionary real-time encryption architecture that was set to transform cloud security forever. I was 28 years old, the chief technology officer, and the sole architect of the software. But to the two people sitting across the mahogany table from me, I was nothing more than an obedient daughter whose life work could be discarded with the snap of a finger. My father, Arthur Vance, sat at the head of the table, impeccably tailored, his gold signet ring reflecting the dim chandelier light. To his right was my mother, Eleanor, sipping sparkling water with a cold, serene elegance that masked a lifetime of calculated cruelty. And sitting right between them, wearing a smirk that made my skin crawl, was my older half-brother, Leo. Leo was 32, a smooth-talking chronic failure who had spent his entire adult life bouncing from failed startup to failed startup, living off Dad's trust fund, and burning through millions of dollars without ever writing a single line of code or making an honest day's wage. Yet, in my parents' eyes, Leo was the golden son, the heir apparent, the man destined to lead the Vance family name into glory. I was just the workhorse, the invisible daughter kept in the basement to build the engine while Leo sat in the driver's seat. "We're giving Leo the billions," Dad said flatly. "You're fired. Go." The words hung in the sterile air of the boardroom like an execution sentence. I froze, my hands resting on the leather portfolio containing the master encryption keys to Sentinel. My eyes widened. Sold my code? Mom smiled, a thin, razor-sharp curve of her lips that carried no warmth whatsoever. Sold the business. "You can't do this," I whispered, my voice trembling, though I desperately tried to hold back the sting of rising tears. "Sentinel isn't the company's property, Dad. I patented the foundational algorithm under my own name before Vance Innovations was even registered as an LLC. I wrote every line of that software in my college dorm room. It's my life's work. You can't just hand it to Leo to sell off." Leo leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his smile widening into a triumphant sneer. "Oh, save the dramatic monologue, Evie," he drawled, adjusting his cufflinks. "Dad signed the executive override an hour ago. As CEO, he has full authority to liquidate company assets. The buyout offer from Apex Global Solutions came in at $3.5 billion. That's billions, sister. Money that belongs to the family. Money that I am going to manage." "You don't even know what an encryption protocol is, Leo," I snapped, slamming my hand onto the table as I stood up. "You will destroy everything. You're going to hand a multi-billion-dollar military-grade infrastructure to a conglomerate without even knowing how to maintain the back end." "That won't be your problem anymore, Evelyn," my mother interjected smoothly, looking down at her manicured nails. "You've always been so overly emotional, so possessive. You should be grateful we gave you a platform to exercise your little hobby. But it's time for the men to handle real business. Security will escort you off the premises. Hand over your keycard and laptop." I looked at my father, begging him with my eyes to show a shred of paternal decency, to remember the nights I stayed up helping him keep the company afloat when we were on the verge of bankruptcy. But his eyes were dead, hollowed out by pure, unadulterated greed. "You heard your mother," Arthur said coldly. "Leave." Just as 2 burly security guards stepped through the heavy double doors to grab my arms, the high-backed leather chair at the far end of the table rotated. Sitting in the shadows had been the representative from Apex Global Solutions, the anonymous lead investor who had flown in on a private jet to finalize the $3.5 billion acquisition. He had remained silent throughout the entire exchange, draped in a bespoke dark navy suit, his face obscured by the low light. The buyer stood up. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp gray eyes and an aura of quiet, terrifying authority that instantly silenced the room. He slowly adjusted the lapels of his suit coat, walking with deliberate, unhurried steps toward the head of the table. Actually, the buyer began, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that cut through the tension like a scalpel. Leo perked up instantly, practically preening as he extended a hand. Ah, Mr. Vance. I mean, Mr. Sterling. As you can see, we've just cleared up the minor internal administrative clutter. The deal is ready for your signature. $3.5 billion, and Sentinel is yours. Julian Sterling didn't even look at Leo's outstretched hand. He walked right past my brother, right past my father, and stopped directly in front of me. He looked at my tear-streaked face, then down at the company keycard resting on the table, and finally back up to my parents. Actually, Julian repeated softly, turning his icy gaze toward my father, the acquisition contract Apex Global drafted is strictly contingent on one non-negotiable clause. We are not buying Vance Innovations. We are buying the intellectual property rights to Sentinel, which our legal team confirmed 20 minutes ago are registered exclusively under the name of Miss Evelyn Vance. My parents went deathly pale. Leo's jaw dropped. What? Dad stammered, scrambling through the paperwork. No, she was an employee. The work-for-hire doctrine. Does not apply, Julian interrupted coldly, pulling a sleek black tablet from his coat and sliding it across the table. Miss Vance filed the base architecture prior to her employment agreement, maintaining primary ownership with a conditional licensing grant to your firm, a grant that automatically terminates in the event of her wrongful termination. Julian turned to me, a faint, imperceptible glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Miss Vance, my car is waiting downstairs. Shall we go discuss your new company? Julian Sterling walked toward the exit, pausing at the heavy double doors just long enough to hold them open for me. I didn't say a single word to my family. I grabbed my leather portfolio, left my company keycard sitting on the mahogany table like a badge of dishonor, and walked past my father, mother, and brother with my head held high. Behind me, I could hear the panicked shouting, my father desperately calling out to Julian, Leo slamming his fist on the table in a temper tantrum, and my mother's polished facade completely shattering as she realized $3.5 billion had just evaporated into thin air. Downstairs, a sleek black Maybach was waiting in the private executive garage. Julian opened the door for me, slid into the back seat opposite mine, and signaled to the driver. As the car pulled out into the pouring rain of the city, the silence between us was heavy, charged with an intensity I hadn't expected. Why did you do that? I asked, my voice still trembling slightly as I pressed my hands against my legs to stop them from shaking. You could have bought them out. You could have forced the legal battle and tied me up in court for years with Apex's legal team. Julian leaned back, crossing his legs, his piercing gray eyes locked onto mine. Because I don't invest in stolen ideas, Evelyn, and I certainly don't do business with idiots like your father and brother. My analysts spent 3 months auditing Vance Innovations. Do you know what we found? Every breakthrough, every line of code, every strategic patch that kept that firm alive was authored by you. Your father is a glorified salesman with a gambling problem, and your brother is a black hole of financial ineptitude. If I gave them $3.5 billion, Sentinel would be obsolete in 6 months. You are the brains. I buy brains, not shadows. He pulled out a silver fountain pen and a newly printed document from his briefcase, setting them on the small wooden tray between us. This is an offer for a strategic partnership, Julian said calmly. Apex Global Solutions will fund a brand new independent software firm, Vance Security Labs. You will hold 51% controlling interest. You will be CEO and CTO. Apex will provide $50 billion in venture backing, global infrastructure, and legal protection. In exchange, Apex receives exclusive defense distribution rights to Sentinel. I stared at the document, my heart pounding against my ribs. And my family? A slow, dangerous smile crept across Julian's face. Your family made a fatal mistake. They terminated your contract, which automatically triggered the reversion clause of your intellectual property. As of 10 minutes ago, Vance Innovations no longer has a license to use, host, or service Sentinel. Every client they currently serve, including government defense contractors, international banks, and Fortune 100 firms, is using unlicensed software. Tomorrow morning, we file for an immediate federal injunction to freeze their servers and issue a cease and desist. They'll be ruined, I whispered. A cold, intoxicating wave of satisfaction began to wash over the betrayal I had felt just an hour ago. Ruined is an understatement, Julian replied coldly. They will be bankrupt, facing criminal copyright infringement, and buried under hundreds of breach of contract lawsuits from their investors within 30 days. Unless, of course, you want to show them mercy. Mercy? I laughed, a bitter, sharp sound that echoed in the luxurious interior of the car. They threw me out like garbage after I spent 6 years building their empire. They laughed in my face while handing my life's work to a man who couldn't explain what an API is if his life depended on it. No, Julian, I don't want mercy. I want them to lose everything. Good, Julian said, handing me the pen. Then sign, and let's begin. I signed the contract without hesitation. Over the next 48 hours, while I set up shop in Apex's state-of-the-art tech campus in downtown Manhattan, my family's world began to burn around them. By Thursday morning, the federal injunction hit Vance Innovations like a freight train. Every major server running Sentinel went dark. Their corporate clients, furious that their entire security infrastructure had been abruptly shut down, flooded Arthur Vance's office with panic and rage. Stock prices for Vance Innovations plummeted 90% in a single trading session. I sat in my new corner office on the 60th floor, watching the financial news networks cover the collapse live on a widescreen TV. Beside me sat a hot cup of black coffee, and across from me was my lead legal team, filing patent enforcement suits in 3 different international jurisdictions. Suddenly, my private cell phone began to ring. The caller ID read Dad. I let it ring 3 times before picking up and placing it on speaker. Evelyn, thank God. My father's voice was hysterical, stripped of all the cold authority he had displayed in the boardroom. You have to fix this. The servers are down. The Department of Defense just threatened us with treason charges if the encryption keys aren't restored by noon. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Dad, I said coolly, taking a sip of my coffee. You fired me, remember? We're giving Leo the billions. You're fired. Go. Those were your exact words. Evie, please. My mother's voice shrieked in the background. We're your family. Leo made a mistake. We all made a mistake. We were confused. Just sign the waiver and transfer the keys to Leo so he can stabilize the market. Leo? I chuckled softly. Why don't you ask the golden boy to fix the source code himself? He's managing the business now, isn't he? He should have no trouble re-engineering a military-grade quantum encryption system by noon. Evelyn, you bitch. Leo's voice boomed over the phone, laced with panicked fury. You set us up. You walked off with Sterling and left us to take the fall. I'll sue you. I'll put you in prison. You won't put anyone in prison, Leo, I replied, my tone turning as hard as ice. Because in less than an hour, the Securities and Exchange Commission is going to serve you with arrest warrants for illegal asset liquidation and fraud. You sold a software license you didn't own. Silence deadened the line for 3 agonizing seconds. Evelyn. Daughter. Please, Arthur whimpered, his voice broken. We have nothing left. The banks just froze our personal assets to cover the liquidated damages. They're repossessing the estate. Tell us what you want. What do you want from us? I leaned back in my leather chair, looking out over the breathtaking skyline of New York City, feeling the full weight of my power finally restored. I want you to attend a press conference tomorrow at 10 a.m., I said quietly. Because I am buying Vance Innovations out of bankruptcy for exactly $1. And you 3 are going to hand over the keys in front of every major news outlet in the country. The next morning at 10 a.m. sharp, the grand press room at the Manhattan Convention Center was packed wall-to-wall with camera crews, journalists, and financial analysts. Flashbulbs strobed continuously as I stepped up to the podium, clad in a sharp, tailored ivory suit. Behind me sat Julian Sterling, observing with an enigmatic smile, and beside him sat my family, looking defeated, humiliated, and utterly broken. Arthur's eyes were sunken and bloodshot. Eleanor looked as if she were on the verge of physical collapse, and Leo sat hunched over, his hands trembling violently as he stared at the polished floor. They had spent the last 24 hours watching their personal accounts get frozen, their assets seized, and their prestige stripped away. They were penniless, cornered, and entirely at my mercy. I adjusted the microphone, looking directly into the primary news camera broadcasting live to millions worldwide. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice ringing out with unwavering clarity. Over the past 48 hours, there has been much speculation regarding the collapse of Vance Innovations and the ownership of the Sentinel encryption protocol. Today, we put those questions to rest. I turned slightly toward my family. Vance Innovations has officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Under the terms of the court-approved restructuring agreement, I, as CEO and majority owner of Vance Security Labs, have officially acquired all remaining physical assets, offices, and infrastructure of Vance Innovations for the grand sum of $1. A collective murmur gasped through the crowd of journalists. Notebooks rustled frantically as reporters began shouting questions, but I raised my hand to command absolute silence. Furthermore, I continued, to ensure complete transparency, the former executive management board, Arthur Vance, Eleanor Vance, and Leo Vance, will now step forward to sign the final surrender of corporate authority. Dad stood up first, his knees visibly shaking as he shuffled to the small table positioned beside the podium. Tears welled in his eyes as he picked up the pen. With a trembling hand, he affixed his signature to the legal document that stripped him of every title he had spent a lifetime building. Mom followed, her head lowered in shame, sobbing softly as she signed away the family empire. Finally, Leo stumbled forward. As he reached for the pen, he glared at me with pure venom, whispering under his breath so only I could hear, "You ruined us, Evie. You destroyed your own family." I leaned in close, my voice barely above a whisper, sharp and lethal. "You destroyed yourselves the moment you decided my life's work was yours to steal. Now sign, Leo, or the federal marshals waiting outside will take you into custody right now." With tears of rage streaming down his face, Leo signed the document and practically collapsed back into his seat. With these signatures, I announced loudly back into the microphone, Vance Innovations is officially liquidated. The new era belongs entirely to Vance Security Labs. As the room erupted into applause and flashing lights, 2 uniformed federal marshals stepped through the side doors of the press hall, marching straight toward my family. Leo gasped as an officer pulled his arms behind his back, clicking heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. "Leo Vance, Arthur Vance," the lead agent declared, his voice echoing over the quieted crowd, "you are under arrest for securities fraud, illegal transfer of non-proprietary assets, and grand larceny." My mother shrieked in horror as she watched her husband and golden son get led away in chains right in front of every major television network in the world. She fell to her knees, looking up at me with desperate, pleading eyes. "Evelyn, please stop them," she sobbed, grabbing at the hem of my pants. "He's your brother. He's your father. You can't let them go to prison." I gently pulled my trouser leg out of her grasp, looking down at her with cold, unyielding detachment. "You told me in the boardroom that it was time for the men to handle real business, Mom," I said softly, as the press cameras captured every second of her agony. "It looks like the men are finally getting what they deserve." I turned my back on her as security escorted her weeping frame from the auditorium. Julian stepped up beside me, extending a celebratory glass of champagne as the chaos settled. "Magnificent," Julian murmured, touching his glass to mine. "A complete, flawless victory." "No," I replied, taking a slow sip as I watched my family's blacked-out police transport drive away through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "It wasn't just a victory, Julian. It was justice." Within 3 months, Vance Security Labs became the fastest-growing technology firm in history, valued at over $15 billion. I was featured on the cover of Forbes, named Person of the Year, and secured the safety of digital infrastructure worldwide. Arthur and Leo were both convicted and sentenced to 7 years in a federal penitentiary, where Leo spent his days doing hard labor instead of sitting in corner offices.